Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm the GM Philosopher, and today we are talking about how to keep players from dilly-dallying while playing in your D&D game. This question was asked, this was a video request basically, from Twin Steel. Thank you so much, Twin Steel. Twin Steel has always been so super supportive of the channel, reacting, commenting, leaving comments with great insight, etc. So thank you so much for this question. And here's the question. Video idea. What mechanics do you use to put time pressure on players? For example, in a dungeon so they don't dilly-dally in the belly of the beast. This is a great question, and I'm just going to kind of go over what I have done about this. With that being said, if you have any video requests that you would like me to cover in future videos, feel free to drop a comment and let me know. I always compile all those requests and I put them in my list. And while I am a little bit behind on the list, I do get to them as quickly as I can. So I just welcome all questions and thank you so much for asking them. I would also like you to drop a comment. Let me know what you do to keep players from dilly-dallying. Do you have any mechanics? Do you have any techniques? I would like to hear what you do about this. You can drop me a comment. You can make it long. You can make it short, whatever you want to do. But I would love to hear from you, gain some insight, inspiration, and to keep the conversation going in the comments. And with that being said, I'm going to jump into basically what my answer is to this. And this turned out to be relatively complicated, and I'm going to try to keep it brief. But here we go. First of all, there are two different types of dilly-dallying, as far as I can tell. There's out-of-game dilly-dallying, okay? Like out-of-game, small talk, distractions, unrelated conversations, that kind of thing. And then there's in-game dallying, which would be players engaging in activities that don't progress the story as planned, okay? Now, I believe that out-of-game dilly-dallying is like usually more difficult to deal with than the in-game stuff. In-game stuff, I tend to love to let players lead, so it doesn't bother me near as much. But what does, as a GM, rub me the wrong way is sort of when players will use the D&D time for small talk, distractions, and unrelated conversations. And so this does tend to prompt action from me more often than the in-game dallying, but I'm going to discuss both here. Now, first, let's talk about what my solutions are for out-of-game dilly-dallying, okay? I have a few strategies for how I deal with this. And basically, the very first thing I usually do is just communicate about it. Like have a discussion with your group about the importance of staying focused during sessions. You can set expectations. Also, you can establish ground rules at the beginning of the campaign about minimizing distractions. I usually do this. Right now, I'm playing with a very seasoned group of our peers, and we have been playing together for years. So we kind of have this already nailed down. But whenever I bring new people in, I do like kind of go over this with them. Having a new player checklist or a new player sheet is kind of a good thing. Taking breaks can also be a thing. I sometimes do this. This happens naturally in my games. Like if I take a break to get some food, like from the kitchen, or if I take a break, sometimes I have to take my dog out to go to the bathroom. So we'll take little breaks. So we schedule these little breaks to allow for socializing. And they're not really scheduled. They're more like, they basically it's whenever I need a break because the game has to kind of pause. And so we'll take a little break for there. And when I come back, I may even chit chat with them about whatever they're talking about. But then I'll be like, okay, all right, time to get back into this. And we'll get into it, right? So it's important not to be like a taskmaster. It's not like you're managing a company and you have to get your people to get back to work. It is a fun activity. It's a game. So it's like a delicate line. And we want to be like gentle and polite and kind about it. But it is totally fair to bring it up and be like, all right, guys, I'm about ready to jump back into this. I'm pretty excited. You all ready? Let's dive into it, right? That kind of thing. After all, that is the nature of the hangout. So it's kind of a delicate line, but talking about it certainly doesn't hurt nothing. You can also evaluate your group compatibility, right? If out-of-game dallying persists, consider maybe if this group is the right fit for your play style and gaming goals. Okay, so this is something that in the past, I have actually had to deal with. I have gamed with groups who just like either they didn't pay attention to the game and like maybe we showed up for D&D for a 4-hour session, but only spent like 2 hours actually playing because two of the other people were talking about work and, just things like that. And to me, that ruins the atmosphere and the environment. And I'm not really into that kind of thing. So like if a group is going to do that type of thing, like if they're going to spend most of the time talking about out of game stuff, it's probably not going to be the right group for me. Or if a player is kind of doing that, I might very kindly say, oh, let's get back to the game. And then maybe in private, I might be like, hey, I noticed, you did a lot of talking about work, about, video games, whatever. And hey, I love talking about those things too. I do have a personal request though. when we're playing D&D, it's actually kind of important to everyone. I think that we, try to keep it focused on D&D because we only get to play, this many times a week or whatever, and we only get so many hours. And so it is kind of an important thing. And I would just ask that maybe if you could possibly, do more of the D&D playing, which is awesome. And maybe we could, stick to the other stuff when we're not playing D&D. That would be so cool. Just like trying to nicely and politely, kind of say that to players. Again, it's not like you're a taskmaster. You have to drive them to work. This is supposed to be a fun thing. And so that can be a difficult thing to navigate, but that's kind of how I do it. Okay. Now let's talk about in-game dallying. First of all, in-game dallying, while I don't see it as being near as problematic, it can create some problems. It can derail the story. It can lead to boredom for some players and can slow down game progress. Okay, so here are some strategies that I kind of use for this. And once again, this is nowhere near as big an issue for me. I feel like number one is you can use subtle prompts. Okay, you can use in-game cues to nudge players forward, like noises from the next room or NPCs urging them along. Like for example, if they're in a dungeon room and they're just like focused on something that isn't really super important, but maybe they think is important, I might have like a huge sound happen in the next room beyond the next closed door. It's like, what's going on? That will definitely prompt some action typically. And so you can kind of like lure them that way. You might have to change your strategy for the session just a little bit to fix this problem, but I don't see this as a bad thing. I think that being adaptable in these situations could be really to your benefit, right? You can also use what I call the egg timer technique. A lot of people do this. I think saw this on YouTube. You can introduce a visible timer, like have these little like hourglass timers. And basically I have like a 30-second, a 1 minute, a 3 minute, a 5 minute, a 10 minute, a 30 minute, like little egg timers. But I'll take the 30-minute egg timer and I'll just set it up and I just won't say anything. And they'll be like, what's that for? I'll be like, you'll find out when it runs out. So I'll just and this can instill a sense of urgency in players. Sometimes they might spend a lot of time trying to figure out what's going on, but sometimes it can actually cause them to want to move forward and get to wherever they're going faster. And so this kind of works sometimes. You can also induce plot-driven incentives, right? So you can design scenarios where time-sensitive events are kind of urging them forward. An example of this might be like a sinking ship. They don't want to be in it for very long because it's sinking. You could have the dungeon fill with water slowly. You can have like the massive swarm of creeping flesh-eating beetles coming along behind them, not at a super fast, like chasing them pace, but just at a pace that prompts them to continue forward. So you can build things like this into your encounters if this is kind of a problem. I do not tend to find that I need to do many of these things. If anything, the subtle prompts, like they hear a noise in the next room, that is generally more than enough to get my players to go forward. Generally, my players want to move along, and that's just how my group is. So I don't have to deal with that too much, but that's kind of my favorite technique for that. I also want to talk a little bit about a couple adjacent topics here that I think are important. Okay, so balancing between guidance and freedom. I think player agency is really, really important. Okay, so emphasizing like urgency in game isn't always like the number one thing. And sometimes I'll change my encounters because of this. Like, for example, let's say I'm planning out a dungeon. I'm planning a big fight at the end of it. But let's say my players are spending a lot of time on like small things. When we're approaching the part where it's time for the big bad dungeon final boss encounter, I may just eliminate half the dungeon. Like maybe they haven't even explored half of it. I was expecting to go twice as fast. Maybe I'll just call this the whole dungeon and put the boss room next. So I'll eliminate a bunch of the stuff I had put there so that the timing will work. Sometimes I'll go back to the drawing board and then I'll be like, okay, I need to start designing encounters that actually be smaller and simpler. Sometimes as GMs, we design encounters that are just too big and complex and it can take too long, right? So sometimes we have to really simplify and make those encounters kind of smaller, more compact, not less quality, just a little less complex so that we can get through them a little faster. And sometimes you need to break it up into multiple sessions. Like if you have a fantastic dungeon planned out, but the players get through a third of it in the time that you were expecting to get through the whole thing, you might have to realize, you know what, this is a 3-session dungeon. This was not a 1-session dungeon. And sometimes that's okay. It's perfectly fine to pause in a third of the way through the dungeon, come back to it in the next session. There's nothing wrong with that at all. And it can make for a more impactful dungeon. In fact, sometimes you want to slow things down. Just slow them down a little bit, take your time, let players experience the environment, let them have interactions with the NPCs, let them investigate things, etc. You might come up with a lot of cool creative stuff in the meantime. So being flexible on that front, I think that's my number one tactic actually, is that adaptability. I feel like I'm very adaptable, and that this causes me to often abandon my own plans that I had coming into it. I mean, I abandon my own plans all the time in lieu of what I feel like the group is heading toward. So this, I think, is a great way to do it, because if players are dallying in game and doing things that they care about that they think are fun, then you're actually doing a great job. You as a GM are doing something really right and trying to like railroad the players into the story that you had thought about before actually might take away from the great job you're doing, which is actually kind of counterintuitive and weird sometimes to feel like that. But that's something that I've noticed that a lot of GMs do. And I used to do that all the time. But I've found that when I kind of take a more guided freedom approach, where it's like you offer choices that advance the plot, but give players the freedom to approach them in their unique ways, and then I am willing to adapt my plans to that, then the sessions end up coming out way better, I find. Like, that's just kind of my experience with it. With that being said, it might also be important to understand player motivations, right? Pay attention to what excites your players and incorporate those elements into the main story to keep them engaged. So it's like, if you find that magic items really engage your players, you might say, make a point to let them know, hey, in the last room, somehow in game through lore or through a piece of parchment or something, there's magic items in the final room. So they want to get through that dungeon fast. That's another thing you can do. I think that that's also a great approach, right? There are many ways to deal with it. But anyway, these are the ways that I feel like I've dealt with it the most and the best in my gaming situations. And so there you go. That's really all I have to say about this. This is kind of a complex topic and a nuanced topic. So I hope that I've covered it in a way that has given you a little bit of inspiration. Let me know what you think. Drop me a comment. Let me know. And also, please give me a thumbs up and a subscribe. I am trying to grow. I'm almost to 2,000 subs. I'm so close. If I could get to 2,000 subs, that would make me so happy and it'd be so pumped. And I just want to thank you all so much for those of you who have subscribed, helping me to get this far. My little channel is just plugging along like a slow dungeon crawl, but we're getting there, and I love it. And I love creating content for you awesome people about the best game in the world, D&D. So that's going to be it for this one. Thank you so much. I will see you all on the next one. Have an awesome day.